talking for a bit on this, for maybe about 45 minutes or so, and then we will open it up a bit more, because I do want it to be as much, I'm not going to be like telling you, how to do everything. It's more, actually thinking about what we can use with these resources that we have. So any thoughts and ideas, I'm, very welcome to hear the ideas and ask questions about, do you think we'd be able to do this sort of thing and that? And oh yeah, do let me know if the about the sound as well, if that's all right. So a lot of you will have come across this already. Rather exciting new 3D views in Google Earth. Now, this whole thing as well, a lot of it will be based on stuff you can get through Google, and it's not particularly going to be an encomium of how great Google are. Very much the contrary. The problem with a lot of this stuff is that, unlike a lot of things on the internet these days, like Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap and other resources such as that, it isn't actually open source. So you're kind of limited in a lot of ways what you can do with it. But it's such a fantastic resource. It is worth, using it as much as you can. So just a little bit of history about actually Google Earth. I think it is worth, as, art historians and archaeologists, we know the history of the resources and sources that we're working with. Google Earth was actually developed by another company in the late 90s as a program called Keyhole Earth Viewer. And then Google kind of just took it over, like they take over a lot of things. And not all the imagery in it is directly taken by Google. In fact, you can always see at the bottom that it's taken from a number of sources, often US military, the Landsat satellites. And when they say satellite imagery, not all of the imagery in it, and certainly not this really high resolution imagery, is from space or low level orbit. It's actually taken by planes. And it might seem, amazing how these are done, but these 3D views are done essentially semi-automatically by Google, and it usually is Google directly at this point, hiring a plane that's kitted out with loads of cameras pointing in lots of directions, taking thousands of photographs, but having the exact location that they were taken in, so that an algorithm can stitch all the separate views of an object together to create a 3D mesh model and cover it with a texture. And well, they've been doing this for so long, you can put things into the algorithm that means that it knows what shapes to expect. And occasionally you do get glitches, but the good thing about these is that they are fairly disinterested models. They're not affected by human bias. So you are seeing, while they're not one-on-one surrogates of the object, they're very, very interesting bits of evidence for us to use. And of course, you can see connections between things that you really can't see in real life. Like, look at the Buckingham Palace garden here. Although I think they might have squashed that down. But we'll be talking about censorship and stuff later as well. So the use for us as architectural historians is really quite exciting, because we can look at important buildings such as, I'm a bit confused where I am now. Where are we? Oh, just type it in. There it is. Such as this, Westminster Abbey. And while it is, simply just cool to look at these things, you can also, really learn things, and certainly even understand things yourself, as well as teach them to people about how things like where the monks' dormitory at Westminster Abbey was and what's in its place now, the library building, where the refectory was and how it relates to Westminster School, and so forth, and the levels of the construction and how it all fits together. It's no, it really is quite an exciting tool to think about. So what I'll be talking about is really how to get the most out of the different ways to access Google Earth, because there's lots of options and legacy options on how to actually access this data. You can see at the top, I've got the tabs open: Google Maps, Google Earth, Google My Maps we'll be looking at as shortly as well. We'll be looking a little at the largely superseded program Google Earth Pro. And finally, a bit of a look at Google Earth Studio and some of the stuff I've managed to do with that. So first, Google Maps. Google Maps, everyone will have used this. It's mostly meant as a navigation tool. You'll see that most of the options for it are about getting from A to B or finding places to eat and places to visit and so forth. But it is, I think, the best place for researchers to get the most out of all the imagery that's there. While some of the other options like Earth are maybe more user-friendly and nicer to use, you can get much more, I think, imagery out of just the basic bog standard maps. First, a lot of you will have come across Street View. Again, this is really useful for navigation about finding places before you go to them, what places look like. And I just want to show you something like particularly useful here is being able to use the historical view. Now, while this is on the Google car, and as some of you probably have seen the Google car, sometimes you can see it in a reflection if there's one about, but it is just a car with a 360-degree camera on the roof that just drives up and down, automatically taking photos. And it's been around since 2008. So you do often have, with the historical Street View, nearly 12 years worth of archived imagery for places. So here it's very useful to see the progression of the building of the lift at Westminster Abbey, for instance. And it's often useful if you've got this much imagery that you can play about and get the best sort of lit angle and so forth. And while obviously the Google car, unless the building you're looking at is next to a road, you're not going to get an image from the car. The imagery can be quite good sometimes, certainly good enough for a specific view for presentations and so forth, if not for publications. But this is really useful, the historical Street View. And as for historical aerial view, though, that is a little bit of a problem and harder to access, but I'll talk about that shortly. So the other really good thing, as well as the Google car going into Google Maps now, is mostly user uploaded 360. Sometimes you do have a bloke with the backpack walking around with a 360 camera on that Google kind of hire out. It's sort of quid pro quo basis of you get imagery cheap and then we get to use it forever. And some semi-professional stuff as well that people upload to Google. Westminster here is fortunate enough, although it doesn't show as a solid blue line, which is usually a good indication that you have proper geo-referenced 360s that are all in the right place. This one does actually have them as separate dots, and you see you can actually move about. And helpfully, one of the things here is that you can get, the views that out of people who aren't architectural historians, the views that they never take. And it's so useful when you do have a building that's covered properly with 360 degrees that you can at least just do the things like, I took a picture of that, is there one on the other side, sort of thing. And a lot of the the imagery, even by amateurs, can be really high quality. But as I say, not that many buildings have what I say as proper geolocated. So every spot is actually marked properly on the map where it was taken. So if we just pop to another slightly less visited building. Turn that off. There it is. So for an example of where this doesn't happen and the sort of problems you get, let's hope this is the same as it was yesterday. You see that this looks like it's a spot on the south transept. It isn't. It's the west front. And this is one of the problems that, it's not really a problem. I think it's just that people take the picture, they don't have it properly geolocated, and Google just dumps it randomly on top of the building. So that can be a problem that you just either need to work around, or what I advise actually to get the most amount of 360s is actually click directly on sort of the catalog entry index for the building. You scroll down to the photos. So you see most of this is all meant for practical purposes. But if you go to Street View 360, you do get a lot more images than you would necessarily as dots on the map. Sometimes there are images that only appear as dots on the map and aren't here, but I think you're more likely to get what you want out of this. And I do like this as well, Strasbourg, because it's useful, because it's like, oh, it looks like a normal lean-to church, but you can actually see with Google Earth the hidden glazed triforium windows. So I would certainly not advise using any of the things like your places in Google Maps for sharing data. I use it for parking spaces, really. It's as I'll say, a big thing with this is I would always say when you're working with these resources is you want to try and keep all of your data that you gather, such as latitude, longitude, and locations of things, on your side, on your computer, and not rely on Google services. Because one of the things that Google likes to do is sort of launch loads of services and then decide it doesn't like some of them and just pull them. And you do not want to have done a big project that relies on how you saved it on Google servers, and then they just decide to pull it. And they do it a lot. They did it with Hangouts. They had a Google card, I think it was called, that was a pair of glasses that Viewmaster decided to relaunch themselves with, and then Google just pulled it, and now the products are useless. So it's difficult. We're trying to use their imagery as much as possible, really, rather than like think that they're brilliant, because they certainly aren't. I would like to point out as well that just in the last couple of weeks, they have actually changed the way that you collect latitude, longitude. So that is the exact location of anything on the globe. If you just right click on a location, whereas before you used to get an annoying little sort of pop-up thing and you had to copy paste it, now you just click the top one and bam, you get a very specific latitude, longitude, which is great. And then I just advise that if you're tracking like different sorts of buildings, where someone's been, cities where there is this sort of object, it's best just to collect these, and then you can always load them into Google Earth or indeed anything else. And it's best to have individual columns really for the latitude and the longitude. Also, I think the other useful tool I should really point out, and what is really useful particularly about this view, the 3D view, is measuring distances. All you need to do is you right click, and that sets your start point. And then, unlike measuring off aerial photos, you can exactly define what you want to measure. So it's appeared up there, and we can make sure that it is like right outside the edge of the outside wall. So unlike a lot of times that when you say, is this building bigger than this one and so forth, you can actually very precisely define exactly what you want to include in a measurement. And you can go back and you can check, and you can, do we want to include buttresses or just to the actual length of the roof line? Without doing a proper professional survey on site, this is about as good an accurate measurement as you could wish for, really. So that is a specific, I think, really useful thing about the 3D view, because often when you're measuring, if that was your only fixed aerial view, you can't actually really tell where the east wall is. Right. So one other issue, I suppose, with Google Earth is that they do have a tendency to, there's no way whatsoever to see older imagery. So for instance, this is what Paris looks like. Now there was another model of this before the fire. Now, while this is really interesting to see how the buttresses are held up and so forth and all the glass taken out, it is kind of annoying that they can just change things and not have any option for us to see the older versions. And this is particularly annoying in France because, as you'll know, places like is that in 2018 there was a attempted breakout at a prison near Paris, and the French government got very annoyed at Google for having aerial photographs of all its abbeys it turned into prisons. So there's quite a lot of problem with them very hastily, after lots of pressure, censoring images, aerial images. And one of the worst places this happens is where they're in the middle of towns, that the whole center of Troyes, for instance, has been flattened just for this not very big prison that's in it. So we've lost the 3D of Urbain, Saint-Urbain, and the cathedral. And now that's one of the reasons that I'll touch on about, maybe actually looking at archiving this sort of data outside of Earth. But there are ways around it. And this is where I'm going to just introduce, as context really, Google Earth Pro. Now, this is essentially the keyhole program that Google did actually have out as an actual pro thing that you paid like $300 a year for, but it very quickly became free for personal use. And most of the features in it have been superseded. There are some areas that what people used to do was upload their own SketchUp versions of buildings that are just basically built up from the ground plan, and you copy paste textures onto the squared surfaces. They're interesting, but they're nowhere near as interesting surrogates as the photogrammetry ones that we have now. And also, some of them are crap as well. Oh, sorry. I hope the person who's doing that on SketchUp doesn't ever watch this. Anyway, very much limited use, and it's a lot better what we have now. You were able to make, your own maps and tours and output them as videos. But the program is very prone to crashing, and absolutely everything you can do better now in other forms on both Google Earth and, as I'll show you, Google Earth Studio. Except for one thing, which is worth still downloading Google Earth Pro, and it is the only way to get historical imagery. So it is called historical imagery, and there, that you can actually get archives of all of the shots that have been on Google Earth Aerial. And I'm showing this one because this is actually and that's the best picture of it. This Sudbury Pyre is probably a grange held by Westminster Abbey in the 14th century. That's the chapel. This is the large tithe barn, which a pair of not very good enterprises were desperately trying to turn into a wedding venue until it burnt down it burnt down in 2012. There is one with it burnt out on it. So, for this sort of thing in recent conservation aspects of really the past, I'd say 20 years worth of imagery, it's really worth just having Google Earth Pro installed. So you can also sometimes get higher quality stuff as well. I mean, yeah, so that's it with the tithe barn gone. You might notice as well that there is some very old imagery, but it's not really high enough for our purposes. But may be useful nevertheless for this stuff particularly. Right. But it's mostly really airfields and stuff you can see, and it's not. There it is. There's 11 of them. Yeah, there it is. So that gives you a sort of idea how much the 1945 stuff is. Not great, but worth having. And you may have noticed that I've marked them on the thing. You can actually also use it to, if you want to either want to plan a breakout, or you just want to look at what's left of Clevo, you can actually bypass most of the not very good censorship that they did for the prisons. So yeah, you can still get a decent view of Twa, but you can't get the 3D imagery, unfortunately, but you can see it in 2D. So completely pointless on every level, but there you go. So that's really the only reason I would say that you should use Google Earth Pro, but it's quite a big reason, I think. So Google Earth Pro has now been, as I say, superseded by Google Earth, which was launched in about 2 years ago, I think, maybe on a more limited aspect before. One thing I would say, so you just obviously these things you just search for them now, but that it actually launches in a process means that if you have problems with your computer, usually because it doesn't have a dedicated graphics card, or it just doesn't like your graphics processor, this is more likely to run on your computer in software mode. So it is worth, if Maps doesn't work, using this. Now, as I'll just say, as I've been saying, really, that Maps, I think, is best for your own research and getting as much information as possible. Earth is a useful tool, I think, really for teaching and learning, and it is really billed as a sort of learning software than it is just practical navigation. First thing I would like to point out that I think's been brought in fairly recently is that if you go to the Voyager, and it's not that obvious that you can scroll down, but you scroll down past so long flank void, right? And click layers, you've got maps of new satellite imagery, but also really usefully, you can see the areas that have 3D imagery at a large scale. So this is useful if you do want to plan to use anything. Use this feature, you can sort of see what areas that you can use it for. There's more than you think as well. You might think, oh, well, I'm sure London will be in, but not necessarily things that I'm working on. You know, that yes, it is mostly based on population centres, but there are bits in between that can capture quite surprisingly rural areas. The only problem is, and it is annoying, that you can't have your own maps up on top of this. So a point map showing all the sort of buildings that you're interested in and put this over the top, unless, and this is the annoying thing, having to skip between these, but it is worth, I think, just showing you, except it does work in Google Earth Studio. And this is at least, I think, a reason to have Google Earth Studio, because it's annoying having to skip ahead out of sequence, but while you may never get round to using the really advanced aspects of Google Earth because you seriously don't have time to get to grips with it, it's still worth signing up for. They will let basically anybody in, just say, I want to look at buildings in 3D because I like old buildings. They'll let you up. I just think that they don't want too many people using it because, well, it is actually quite resource intensive. But here as well, some of the areas that have been put in, they've been doing them for more heritage and just basic World Heritage interest rather than just population that they were doing it by before. So here you've got actually really high quality for photogrammetry model here of Salisbury. And this really gets done not just because of Salisbury, but also so they can do, is that it? Yes, there it is. Yeah, because they wanted to do this as well, so it's kind of a 2-for-1. But lots of other stuff that might randomly just get stuck in as well. But just to, oh, don't move that. Oh, move Clermont Ferrand. It does show you that, you know, there is more than you think. Like actually of, when I just go through, it's about at least 1 in 5 on the whole. But for areas that you'd kind of expect, you know, you've got a very good chance of an area being in 3D, actually. The most annoying one, though, that's heritage aside, I don't know why Sharps has never been done. There you go. I have to moan about that. But that gives you, I think, really an idea of how much you can, and how likely you are sometimes to find 3D data where you don't really expect it. Right. So back to the Google Earth tool. What is really, I think, the most exciting thing here is the tool for projects, of which this should work. Problem is, it's kind of linked to your drive, this, so I'm having problems running it in guest mode. It has worked. So you can, and I made this, didn't take terribly long, a overlay really of medieval York, which has, using both place mark tools and line and shape tools. Essentially, if you close up a line, it becomes a shape, and that means you can have the middle completely transparent, but you can as well color it in. Like I've colored in the monastic precincts and also recreated the Foss fish pond, which would have all been uninhabitable, but now it's got Morrison's in it. But still, it's a really useful way, I think, here of making things, quite quickly, that do very quickly articulate ideas of the past. And I also did one for Rouen in the same way. Now, the thing is that it does let you as well, for each one, add in images, and you can go through the whole thing as a presentation. So it will be a bit like a power presentation in that it goes sequentially through all the slides and the information, but also you have a 3D view of the object as well. And just showing here, if we just go into edit, so this shows you the sort of thing you can do. And notice here the view you can have of the building has all of these, so heading, relation to north, tilt, range, distance from the object, and then the actual position in space. You won't really, it's useful getting used to terms like this for understanding how to position objects in space, but really all you need to do is just get the view that you want of the building for the for how it appears on the sequential presentation. Click capture this view, and it will automatically fill out the coordinates and data in relation to the object, and then it will always appear like that on your tour. So we're both looking at the east end, so you see there, it's recorded it. So I've mainly here think that a great idea for just finding lots of demolished parish churches and showing how the city works. Tom Nixon made this really, really great. I suppose this is more of a presentation of Lincoln Cathedral, which I think shows the real potential you could have for having presentations of these things. And as for usual, the usual warning, I would say not to make things that aren't much more than being ephemeral. That, yes, it's fine to make PowerPoint presentations, but you don't want to be making things within this sort of Google Earth thing that are like major research projects, because you never know when they'll just pull the plug on a particular feature or whatever, and you're kind of left high and dry that you can't use this anymore. But for stuff like this, I think this is great. So if we just go through here, it just shows you really that you have your establishing slide with the captured view. And you can also, bottom left, can also capture certain geolocated street views. And they're great transition between the real and the street view. And this is still photosphere. So you can look all around and see things, but it captures that particular view. Go next, and you see it all. Whoop, gallery porch, and just does the exterior first, but then when we go into the building, no, that's now the thing I would say though about this, while this is brilliant and a brilliant use of the available data, the actual amount of cathedrals that you could do this for depends on whether there is that precisely geolocated data. So you can see here that the whole interior of the cathedral has been done by, I assume, an amateur photography group, but they're very, very good. I mean, they're actually you can see that they've put it up on a tripod actually, and they've actually been professional enough to go and hide somewhere every time they take a picture because there's nobody in any of the pictures. But if cathedral just has either dots in the wrong place or doesn't have the dots on the map, they're in that 360 photo thing, then you will struggle really to do something as good as this. So you really do have to have. It can be frustrating that you can't. There isn't the available data for some buildings, and it is a bit random really which ones are done properly like this. But it is now really useful as well, just for even getting that last view that you missed of something. You know that it's there, but you didn't take a picture of it and so forth. Absolutely invaluable really at any time. I was actually just trying to find where the tripod was left in, but he's actually been too good and blurred it out. So that is, as you can see, that having, it's a possible idea whether you could have students and that make tours in this way, but the problem is dealing with buildings that you just can't do it because there isn't the data. Like there are an annoying lacuna really on which English buildings, which English cathedrals certainly are missing. Lichfield is annoying. Durham is incredibly annoying. But at least you've got Beverley, which is again surprising. So there isn't really that much hidden in Google Earth, and I think that you know, there's lots of introductions on how to make your projects as well. The only really thing here is you've got the measuring stick in the same way, but it's pretty much the same as in Google Maps. Although I will say, I mean, one of the things you can't see what I'm doing here is how I'm controlling the camera, and that's sort of something that you kind of have to get used to yourself. So if you don't know, it's important to use the buttons in the corner of your keyboard, the Shift, Control, and Alt. Now, what these actually do in the different versions of Earth actually changes. So in Google Maps, the only one that does anything is, and I'm just doing it because I can't remember, is Shift rotates around a position, whereas doing nothing just moves the camera and then it moves it down. In Google Earth, you can move around a central position and you can see the target appears where you're rotating with the Shift key. But with Control, you can also I always forget which one's which, pan and tilt the camera, which you can't do in Google Maps because there's not really any reason you'd want to. If you're navigating, it's an aesthetic thing, but it's useful to remember that. The one thing you can't do to the camera, and this is people who may have worked either in filmmaking or just on 3D modeling generally, you can't roll the camera, you can't turn it round. So that's a useful thing to remember of what you can do in Google Studio. The really aesthetic thing of being able to, if you think camera barrel rolling, then that's totally everything you can do to an object in space, really. So quickly now, my maps. This is, I think a lot of people will have used this. Again, it's an easy to use, but not massively flexible program service, sorry, for modeling map data with latitude, longitude. I should warn you that so you upload things as layers, so you can turn them off, and you can also sort the objects within by a particular data column. And these are something that have been made in Excel and imported in into this rather than made directly in maps, which I would always say it's best to make things yourself and collect the data yourself and then put it into Google. Don't have it stuck in Google, and then you're basically high and dry if they ever end up in the serves. So you see that just automatically styles by the archdiocese and assigns colors automatically, and you can change things. What I just want to warn you now, pretty much most of this is self-explanatory, but there are some things that it's just worth being told really about Google My Maps, which you can see here the URL is just Google co.uk maps, but I would just Google for My Maps, it'll come up. Is that you can only have 10 layers. And when you get to the end of 10 layers, that's it. And it would have been nice if they told you that in advance, but there's no way around it really. So that's why I've started for these mapping out medieval cathedrals. I've started lumping together Poland, Hungary, Croatia, and Lithuania because I'm going to run out of layers otherwise. And the one trick, though, I just want to point out. So if you're collecting latitude, longitude in a spreadsheet, or actually would be better if you were doing it in a proper database, but I think if you're just collecting values, it's not too bad to just use Excel, is that if you plan on exporting it into My Maps, is to do the separate sheets for what you intend to be each layer. And then what you can do is that when you create, so when you can import from an XLSX file, it will only import the top sheet. So what you then do when you've imported it is just go back, make another sheet, the top sheet, save it, and then upload it again to another layer. That's my little trick anyway. This is also where we get the awkward thing about the formats of KML and KMZ. And it is worth sort of untangling these a little bit. They're legacy things from Google Earth Pro, and the K comes from Keyhole, the original name of Google Earth. And it is kind of weird that a lot of the ways that you can move maps between all these different services, so between Maps, between Earth, between Studio, and between My Maps, is often by exporting it to a KML and then re-uploading that from your computer to the other service. It's very strange, but it's kind of the way it's been done because of all this legacy stuff, because of all the old services that they never quite get rid of, but keep instead incorporating all this stuff from older versions. And just is that the difference between KML and KMZ, KML is the most normal one, that it is just really a list of text. It's just when you look at the file, it's just like a source code for a web page. The KMZ is actually a zip file which can contain custom place markers and so forth. So which one you use? Well, if you try and import some stuff from My Maps to Earth, it just comes out and all the icons are red X's because it needs to have the symbols saved inside the file. It never, notices when I had the images up on Ruon, those are just links, so they're contained in the KML. So it's kind of a bit of trial and error, really, of which one you use, because it is all a little bit complicated and a little bit confused. Right, what I will now sort of finally touch upon is what you've seen running Google Earth Studio. So I can't go back to the main page, can I? So we'll just have to look at some project. So this, as I say, you have to send Google an email. If you just search for Google Earth Studio, you'll see a sign up page, and they'll always let you through, really, in what is still billed as a trial, but it's pretty much a finished program now. Now, all that Google Earth Studio really does is take over from the tours function that was in Google Earth Pro, but that was, you didn't really have proper control over the camera. You could only tell it to do to just move from point to point. Here you do have, through a keyframed timeline, so you're basically setting exactly where you want it to be at each frame, and both where the camera rotates, and it will move between each of those keyframes. So if we go through this here, you can see that here this keyframe is where the roll comes in, and then roll back. And then here you can see there are lots of keyframes because I've put in extra locations so it doesn't clip through the sides of the buildings. And then it starts to turn around at the end. Now, the really good thing, though, compared to Google Earth Pro, and that is actually really impressive when you see it, is that when you actually render this, unlike Google Earth Pro, and like this is running now, it doesn't render on your computer. It renders on Google servers, and you then download each individual frame of this as a separate image, which sounds like a lot, but it's storing things as image sequences. You just need to come across a program that can read image sequences as videos. And once you do that, you actually get a fully rendered thing for every single frame. So while on the one that we watched before, you've got textures popping out as they come into view because your computer can't handle them all at once. Here, everything in frame is always rendered to the fullest it can be. So again, there is a slight glitch here actually with the top of the NatWest tower, but before the core was just a stick until you got close to it. But here, everything is very clear. I mean, I'm not sure what sort of quality you're seeing this through my upload from Zoom, but it is very impressive and worth experimenting with. However, there are a lot of things that you really do take for granted in the way that the camera moves in something like Google Earth. So let's go back to Westminster and just watch how the camera moves. First, there's a little bit of a twitch and it zooms out quickly and then moves across. And then poof, you can see there's even a little bit of a buffer as it moves back in. Now, when you just are doing the camera completely by yourself, you realize how much you take these things for granted, so that movements can look very jerky without them. So it is an animation tool. You need to have, really need to go into this with the thought of, like director or an actual animator, and not just the sort of thing you want to show, but how are you going to show it? I mean, with this, the point is that I am not just flying from A to B. I want it to look like it is actually flying between the towers and rolling and moving between it. You've got to have that sort of thought put into it. There are, of course, quick starts where you can just, they've just basically got wizards. So you can just tell it to go to Salisbury Cathedral. Just make sure that the target's in the correct place. And then it'll all just do it for you with the options. And this is a useful way, at least, of doing very basic things and getting started. And you can play about with some of the functions as well to get a bit of an idea. So I'm not going to obviously go through any sort of tutorials because I think that the actual amount of people who will be directly interested in taking this that much further is fairly limited. But I just do at least want to give you maybe a few tips of what not to do. So this I did for, don't save, the Coventry thing is that I decided to maybe do the fly round of Coventry and showing all of the main interesting medieval features was good to do in essentially what is one take. So here we go, we fly down to over the Spon Gate and across the ring road to Spon Street, go down and look at Spon Street, spin round the church, spin out. And this is, I now realize, essentially like Hitchcock filming Rope in one shot, that you really do need to have separate timelines for each thing, because this gets far too complicated and very difficult to deal with, and particularly this bit here. So what I want to do is I wanted to make sure I was looking at the church, and it's just really jerky because it's me just readjusting the keyframe each time, rather than what you can do is set a target for the camera and have it follow, which I should have really done. So what I am doing at the moment is trying to do, don't save, a fly through of the Eleanor crosses, which I'll show you some of the problems here. So this is a short fly through from Lincoln Cathedral, following a camera target over all the parish churches on the way out to the first Eleanor cross. So this is I probably have done this a little bit slow actually, but one of the things is you're better to do stuff slower because at least you have temporal resolution to be able to have it at the speed you want. If you do it at too low a resolution, then if you speed it up, it'll be jerky. However, there is a way to stretch the timeline out if you make that mistake. So there's one last church here, and each time the field of view, so that's the amount that the camera can see, is made smaller, so it looks like it's zooming in. So this is the sort of thing you have to think about, really. And then the idea is we look at all of Lower Lincoln, and the camera target goes off, and then the camera target comes back on again to go down to where the Eleanor Cross was, which is next to the Gilbertine Priory of St. Catherine, which I keep forgetting to move because I've changed my mind where I think it was, because the Gilbertine Priory was here. So the Eleanor Cross was presumably on the main road somewhere. So now, rather than now try and go to Stamford and Grantham, what I realized you can do is you can just highlight the attributes. So that is the exact location in space of the camera at the moment with basically X, Y, Z, longitude, latitude, and altitude. Then I can just, once I've got them highlighted, press Control C, and then you can just make, oh, I hope this works, make a new project. So I'll just test. Usually you use 30 frames a second, and then paste. And now we are in exactly the same place that we were before. So yeah, I think, yeah, I do need a few more attributes, but still you can copy across the exact same attributes. So you are in exactly the same space, and then you can just have a completely seamless new project that moves on from the last one. So that's just something to think about. Yes, I could show you, so I can just show you as well what that clip of Lincoln moving looks like rendered. I think it's just worth doing this just before I do my last thing. Just need to... So this is it downloaded and rendered. Oops, got stuck now. Probably running out of memory. There we go. So yeah. Anyway, gives you an idea how clear it all is, and how everything is, rendered to full fidelity and all the textures are loaded. And it does take quite a while, actually, and you have to leave the Chrome window open while it renders and downloads each frame. But it really is worth it, because sometimes it can look a bit creepy how real it is. And you don't have to have the things on it. In fact, actually, a few months ago, you couldn't have the new things on. Right, so the last thing I want to show you is something quite exciting, is that, as I've been saying, I do get a bit annoyed with Google and how they can just remove things like toi and so forth. And I have actually found a way through essentially just seizing what the graphics rendering process of Chrome and stealing what is in the memory to download the data. Don't save. Got my thing here. Was this my best one? To essentially just turn the textures on, download to my own computer the 3D data for a small area. It's hard to set up, but once you do it, it's quite easy to do. So I am actually looking really to try and before they stop this working, to try and download as many cathedrals as I can, just for archival purposes, even though I actually really have no idea what I'm going to do with them. Now, these I do think are the same scale, but they do seem to sometimes come out at different scales from the data. But you can do, how do I see? I have no idea how to use this thing. You can actually, there we go. Once you've got this, I can actually take these things apart and you could do all sorts of, whether it would actually be useful in any way or just silly, I don't know. But, there's a lot of potential really of what you can do with this stuff. And I'll just import one just so you can see Google Maps capture. At one that I did capture this obscure little cathedral in, I think it's the south of France, Tarbes. It takes a little while to import because obviously there's a fair bit. Each of these it's only about 50 megabytes actually. Each of these models are not massive, so that's why I do want to just get and copy them. Still working. Probably is taking a bit longer because Zoom takes up quite a bit of memory. There it is. So this, even though it's not actually a particularly high resolution model, you can see that it is, strangely, for a small little Romanesque building the same size as Amiens. So that's something I do need to work on. But I assume that they're actually, from what I've seen, scaled to particular, like 20% bigger and so forth. So I'll have to have a look at that. But I do think it's worth collecting them. So that's where I've finished with Google for now. And I'm actually now going to see if I can find where the questions are and see if anyone's actually asked anything.
There's one question if you go to the Q&A.
Whoa, That's a great question because it's the one thing that I haven't said. So I don't think there is a historic OS thing, but it is so useful to use this site, the National Library of Scotland, which has got very good scans of all of the OS maps as proper geo-referenced. And yes, this one was, I was just looking at the quality of the OS London 1 to 1056 is so incredible. Look at this. It even shows the layouts of arcades inside churches, as well as the usual sites of and things written in Gothic font. For most of the country, you do want to use the OS 25-inch, which is usually the highest, but the London one is just whack, really. Now, how to access this? It can be a bit difficult to remember that it's on the National Library of Scotland, and you click Explore Geo-Reference Maps, and you use the OS 25-inch. My trick really is because I can't think of any other buildings, is to, on Wikipedia, in the top right-hand corner for most places or buildings on Earth, there is the coordinates. And if you click that, it takes you to an open source interim site called GeoHack. And here, as well as having a handy link to the satellite view, you also have a link to the National Library of Scotland's OS map page. So there. And it will, unfortunately, it loads with the 1-inch at first. So just always change it to, well, for most of the country, change it to the 25-inch. So even for fairly obscure sites, it'll be here somewhere. I think this is because I'm in. There you are. I think it just didn't come up there because I was in, I'm in guest mode and it's not working out where I am properly. So this is really useful because then you can actually overlay it onto general aerial photos. And the amount you can find with field divisions and stuff is very good for tracking property and even, medieval sites and so forth. And a lot of the locations of demolished things that are done with the Gothic script are very useful. So that's the shortcut really to getting to the National Library of Scotland's geo-referenced OS maps, is to use GeoHack from Wikipedia, because most buildings I've come across do have that GeoHack link. And if they don't, well, you should probably put it in yourself. I can't say I actually ever have. But this is, I use this an awful lot, actually, especially just for day-to-day stuff. And you're wondering, oh, I wonder what used to be here before the war, because most of these are made about 1900. So this is tremendous resource for all sorts of research in England and Wales, because if we zoom out, I think, not sure if it can render them all. There's hardly any in Ireland. But anyway, that's more about the history of OS than anything else. And there's other resources here that you can just mess around with as well. But you will see that you do not actually have access to Google Earth data, because unlike most services, it is not open source. So they don't share in the same way. So really, it's just like trying to use them as much as we can, really. Because it's not like they own most of the data. I mean, some of the stuff, a lot of it is just because they've kind of taken it over because they're just so big that no one can say no. All right, so I've done that. I mean, one thing that I've never really as well looked at is that that Google don't do. Let's see if this works. Is interior photogrammetry, of which I've not been able to find a huge amount that's been done. But this is the same process as the planes flying around taking buildings at lots of angles, but done inside from a number of locations to get enough photographs that you can knit them together in what is essentially this surrogate of the real object, in this case, Smithfield Priory. See, there's no outside and it's basically built up on top of the ground plan, but this is all done from somebody just spending a very long time taking photos and then stitching them together, semi-automated really. That you do have to clean these things up a bit, and I mean, one of the plans I suppose I have with the Blender stuff is to try and clean these up so you just have the church building left. But of course, I don't want to completely divorce them from their surroundings because that's important as well. But it's something I'm, worth trying. And a lot of it's about things are done automatically, but then you have to clean them up. But yeah, this is a best model I've seen of a church interior. And you can actually really get some very important perspectives on this building from this work. But Sketchfab has lots of models that some of you can download the whole thing for free, and others you can look at for free just in the browser. Right. Yeah, I think that it won't take me long to just write up this and just I mean links really certainly. And it will be available. I think we're going to put it on the YouTube, but it may be better for I mean, actually, like to learn how to do the this, I had to do it by watching a YouTube video, and quite frankly, I wish I could just have written out notes a lot of the time because it's easier to follow. It's nice to have these things explained, but actually, when you want to do them yourself, I think you'd prefer to just have the links. And I can link to some of the projects as well. But a lot of it is just playing about with the stuff. And I don't think no, I think that the things you do in studio are just, they're kind of above what Earth can save. You can import stuff you've made into Studio. Particularly useful is where is it? It's the overlays, that you can import. I don't have it here. So you can have your collection of place marks in Google Earth Studio to help you certainly to help you find things as you work on the project, but you can't do it the other way. I mean, the main problem about this is I don't know what most people will have to render this, because it does actually just choose a folder and it will just then It used to be you waited hours for a zip file to be ready, but now you it just downloads each of the frames to a folder on your computer, and then you have to yourself work out how to turn it into a video. And it's not that difficult, but you will need to find your own bit of software to actually share it as a video.
As a panelist, I'm not sure I can type into the question and answer, or I'm a bigger computer idiot than even I think I am. But what do you use to make your renders?
This program Lightworks, but the only reason I don't recommend that is that you can't export in full resolution unless you pay. So it's probably best to look for something else. I just use it because I'm used to it. But that's what I'm playing through when I'm doing this. Is it's another keyframed based video editing software, but well, I've still got the projects. It is you don't get the same crispness. So if you wanted to use this in a presentation, it would be kind of annoying if you're only putting it out as not in HD. So yeah.
I have another rather stupid question, which was relating, maybe you don't know the answer, to Tom's Lincoln tour, which he'd done using Google Earth Studio. I'm not sure.
No, this is Google, just Google Earth.
Just Google Earth. How did he stitch in those sections and what have you?
All right, so I'll just show you actually how to do something like that. Is that, let's go and have a look at the building. Decent one. Is that so? Oh, that's not Lincoln Cathedral. All right, so you can, so let's just open, no, create, go on, create, whatever. So if we want our first frame to look at the west front, then we just put place mark, west front, and save to Untitled Project. And then if we go in and edit that, you see we can, as I was saying, set the view manually. So the easiest way to do that is just go like that and then capture this view. And now it's this capture this view that is the useful thing for doing the street view. So choose this path here. This is Google Car. And now we here capture this view. And then this is. So now, when you go through the presentation, it automatically goes to that position that you captured, you see, and you can have it looking whatever way you want, and then click the capture this view in the edit thing, and it will do it. So that's all we've done, really. I mean, it's kind of just automating it. But this is, you know, Lincoln is a particularly good building to use, partly because it's got a public road all the way around it. I mean, you can even park here. Actually, you can park here any day for 2 hours. You can park free on Sunday as well. But you've got, of the whole south side, pretty good professional Google data that you can use. So you can pretty much be sure that you can stand on this presentation wherever you want. So here we go. Let's again just show how he got to the judgment porch. Look at it. Capture this view. There you go. So now when you go through the present, and you'll go to the south transept, it's, you know, it clips through the ground, but I think that's kind of fun anyway. And then to that one, you see, it stitches them together basically automatically. And this is the problem with Studio, though, is that this looks good, but when you in Studio, you've pretty much got to do that all by yourself, that sort of camera work. So while it's got a lot of potential, it can be quite difficult to get it to do what you want. So it's but you do have complete control in Studio, but in this, you know, it's pretty much done automatically for you. So and if this is really good enough for teaching purposes, I think. Any other questions or ideas? Yes, and that is the problem as well, that you are stuck with whatever scaffolding is on buildings at the time. Same with Notre Dame. So annoyingly, you can't even see the cloisters at St. Stephen's. And I think that there was another model that didn't have Big Ben in this big zip-up coat. So that's why I do think it maybe is worth trying to archive some of this. I mean, Google will have it archived, but goodness knows if they will ever share it. And there are some like this, where you've got like this stuck on it forever, and it is kind of difficult that they obviously choose a clear day and that to you know, they want to get as many cloudless pictures as possible, but unfortunately they don't seem to want to ever kind of make composite views to get rid of things on particularly important buildings. So it is, this also actually isn't a very good, it's quite a, see, the textures aren't that good. Not all of them actually are as good as each other. Like the ones like Salisbury is really crisp, and some of them as well can be a bit dark. There are some areas that are incredibly dark, and I think that they were just trying stuff out first, and see, like they could do more with the non-sun sides as well. If you want to do, this might be something I do with the archived ones, is that it probably isn't too hard to make it so that the north side is actually more legible. So that's something I think about. So I think that is that.
Does anyone have any other questions for James while we have him here about any of this technology?
James, will you answer the phone when I ring you up and say, I don't know how to, I've lost the project that I was. That's my only question, really. I mean, that was tremendous. You won't. Okay, that's probably very wise. What an extraordinary resource.
Sometimes you just wonder what you could actually do with it, though.
Well,
I mean, it is important. I mean, that you know, they aren't one-to-one at all, and they have glitches on them, but they're still, you know, representations like ground plans that we should be looking at more. They can certainly show you how things connect together a lot more than you can see when you visit buildings.
The spatial relationships are seen from the air, and as it were, then being able to see it from the ground, so that you have both conceptual and perceived relationships between buildings, I think is extraordinarily interesting, actually. Because in some ways, when you're conceiving the new church up on that hill and the new church up on that hill, it's very clear in your mind, probably is very clear in their mind, whereas for us, schlepping up and downhill, it's a rather different matter. And there does seem to be a question. No, maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
there you go. Anonymous attendee has a question. How would you go about downloading the data for archiving?
Yeah, you have to download about 3 different programs, and if you just search for download Google Earth 3D data into Blender, you'll get a short video, which is actually pretty good. I will actually just put, because the problem is that, well, okay, I can't actually do it because I need to close down Chrome and open it in a debug mode and stuff. That means that this program called RenderDoc can kind of steal what's in the 3D buffer, and then you can save that basically. And you need to make sure you've got to have older versions of things and stuff. It's not complicated to do, but it's really complicated to set up. So I will do some sort of note that you can distribute for people who are actually interested in perhaps. Blender is a completely free program as well. That's the reason I'm using it. I mean, Blender's an amazing program. It can actually, while not really quite Hollywood level 3D animation and effects, it's good enough for the sort of stuff you see on Netflix and that. You know, it is actually industry level powerful. So what you could actually do with these buildings is particularly exciting. But yeah, I'll link to the video, because I only actually worked out how to do this a couple of days ago. But I thought it was important, really, since I was doing this, that I actually did have a think. But one thing that also I've not done, because I don't really know a program that can do it, is that in Google Earth Studio, when you download your renders, you can actually have all the geolocated data associated with it, so that when you load it into an effects program like Adobe After Effects, you can highlight a particular building, and even though you're moving through space, the program can tell where it is and keep the highlight in the same place. So it's not just still pictures, it actually has the data associated with it. So that's how you could do graphics to show, and I was trying to bring up my, there we are. You could actually have, you know, while the camera is moving, you could still like have on the render a processional pathway or something animated and proceeding, but it stays in the same place. So you've got like what looks like static footage, but because the program knows exactly where the camera's floating in space, you can actually manipulate it as if it's still 3D. So that's something, you know, particularly with showing relationships between abbeys and so forth. And it would be very interesting to do some sort of videos that have those sort of urban processions that you get a lot in more sort of Central Europe. But
sure would. Bloody hell. Oh.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the thing that I also encourage with Studio, is that it is a way of archiving it, so that when the data changes and so forth, that you do actually have a permanent thing that you've made to represent something, rather than just like, oh, look at this, it's nice, isn't it? And that, so it's bringing stuff out, and also in, you know, much crisper detail, because it's rendered on their server sides. So you see there that St. Maclou just kind of, the textures come in. That's the thing, is that it's because my computer's not as powerful as Google's to actually render it in full all the time. This Ruan's actually quite a really fun model, actually, because there are ruins and stuff as well. So anyway, yeah. Shall we draw that to a close then now?
Yeah, I think we should draw that to a close. I think you've given us a lot to think about. And I'm sure we've recorded this, so we'll post it on YouTube. So if there's a point in the coming weeks or months that you, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night desperately wanting to remember what James said about, you know, Google Earth Studio, you can return to that. And we'll put, if James types up a few notes, we can put those up on the website the BAA website under resources, just as kind of a place to aggregate things. And we'll put up links to some of the things that he's shown us today in terms of the work that he's done. And I'm sure if you have any pressing questions, if you'd like to email James, I'm sure he'd be willing to shoot you a response.
Yeah, but all I mean, I'll actually properly link to Maps, Google Earth, where you can download Google Earth Pro, which remember is just for the historical imagery, really. And also for anybody who's interested, exactly how I managed to get the RIPs working, which is not something that most people will want to do, but I'm happy to share. You have to have like Blender 2.9 and Render Doc something and that, but once you get it working, basically all you do is you go over the model that you want to do in Google Maps, wiggle it about, which gets all the data to load, and then click capture in the other program and it gets it all out, and you save it as a file and you can import it in this. So yes, it's not that difficult. But anyway, thanks for
very powerful.
That was tremendous, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James.
Right, we all wave now, don't we?